We're in the studio. I was chatting with Katie, I was showing our podcast, and she said you just two gingers hosting a podcast. So it's and I think both of us had a little beard, so we could be called the Ginger Beards instead of the Gingerbreads. The Ginger
The
Beards.
the Ginger Beards also has a ginger beer pun to it as well.
There we
It's
go.
just,
There we go.
puns
It's
all the way
just
down.
or gingers all the way down.
It's just, it do be like that. We are spicy like ginger. It
Yes.
works. The real question is, Cameron, if you had to pick, would you be fresh ginger or dried ginger?
Fresh ginger or dried ginger? Fresh ginger.
Fresh ginger, straight out the ground, pulled up by the root.
Yeah. I'd be dipped in a little soy sauce and a little wasabi as well.
Oh, so you're pickled ginger. You're a pickled ginger. I left that one off of the calculus entirely.
Well, you never know.
Well, welcome to Zero Detraction, a podcast about how first-time founders create companies that scale. Regular co-hosts coming at you, spicy gingers as usual. I'm
one
JD
spicy, one pickled. We
One
all
spice.
forms.
I'm definitely the fresh ginger, grated on a microplane. Just let's get as hot as we possibly can in that mouth. Wait, that took a turn. Anyway, I'm JDM. Here with my other regular co-host, Cameron. Cameron, how are you?
I'm doing good, doing fantastic, and excited to be in the studio as always, and having fun, but talking startups and hopefully adding a lot of value to those that have us in your ears. So thanks for tuning in for another episode.
Yeah, awesome to have everyone here. We are coming at you with an episode that we are calling Cool Story, but what did you learn? So here's how it's going to work. We're going to do a little setup first, but the way the game's going to work is we're going to get our intrepid AI co-host Cass to tell us what a founder did. And say, here's the company, here's what the founder did, and then we're going to ask what the hell they thought they were trying to prove, right? And so let's do some setup here, right? So there's a really common story where a startup is doing a lot of stuff. There's a lot of activity, and it all feels like they're making forward motion, but we don't necessarily think so. We don't think that it's the quote unquote the stuff that matters. And to jump straight to the end, and then we can kind of step back. To jump straight to the end, the stuff that matters is stuff that gets you evidence from the marketplace, right? And this is our traction science, hard at work here. We science the hell out of this shit, and in order to do that, right, we have to say, here's what we're trying to get to. Here's what success looks like. Therefore, we measured blank, and we learned that, right? So we really do get into the actual science here. We form hypotheses, design actual experiments, get data back, analyze that data, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, using the normal tools that we would use to analyze data, get that result, learn something from it, analyze, synthesize, rinse, repeat. It's real science. What separates the actions that look like that move a startup forward from those actions that feel like they're important, that feel like they're substantive, that feel like there's momentum behind them is what's the big difference, Cameron, between those two things?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the biggest thing for me, I would add in this kind of element as well that we talk about around traction thinking. So we talk a lot about the science, but also the thinking behind it. And so really this intentionality to go to the marketplace and gather evidence. It all starts with really this process of thinking about our startup as a whole bundle of risks and assumptions, and that we actually need to go out and validate and invalidate. And we joke around with this term called procrastivity. I think we did that in our last office hours. And really, as we think about this element of procrastivity, which is you working on things that don't actually make forward progress for the business or the startup, is because it makes you feel good. But that ultimately starts with you really not having that look in the mirror to say, what is the biggest risk and assumption that I have? And that there's likely something that you're holding back to, is what we'd say is the procrastination is unprocessed fear, which is really you probably not actually mapping out and understanding this is the biggest risk and assumption that I need to tackle. And let me go actually take action towards validating or invalidating that. And so for me, that's the biggest thing as we start to bring these two worlds of traction thinking and traction science together, is that the science is the effort and experimental process to gather that evidence from the marketplace. But that traction thinking is the way in which we think about our startup, and that we ultimately are this just engine of gathering evidence to either validate or invalidate our assumptions. And then how does the theory of our startup change from that point on? And so really what we're hopefully to tackle here today is to remove just action for action's sake. That might make you feel good and continue your energy in building your startup, but you're not actually making any forward progress because you're not getting any tangible learning, or that learning that you might feel you're getting isn't actually based in any evidence at all, which furthers that risk as you move on to that next phase and element of your startup. So I don't know if I fully tackled exactly your question, but that was just really top of mind for me of combining those two elements. So I'll pass it back to you, JDN.
Yeah, I think you covered the bulk of it, and I think the part that is worth emphasizing is the word unprocessed. When we say unprocessed fear, a lot of times I don't think founders realize that that's where it's coming from. And so, because it's unprocessed, right? By definition, it's unprocessed fear. And so it's not that they necessarily feel fear. I think that they feel resistance. I can't launch yet because, we don't want to put this in front of customers yet because I don't want to, go interview these customers because I don't want to, put this price tag out there because, and so there's that resistance there that they're not necessarily going to, register that as fear, I guess. Like, it's not gonna, but because it's unprocessed, right? But there is behind that a lot of fear, and that's where the founder psychology of this like traction thinking comes into play. Is that if you're not getting data from the actual market, from actual customers, you're basically just wasting your time. And so it's important to take a step back and think about where is that resistance actually coming from, and then also what is it that resistance is preventing you from learning. And can you really justify to yourself and to your investors and to your advisors that this is not something that actually needs to be learned right now? Because you're intentionally making the decision not to learn it yet. And I think that that's a decision that requires justification, is we are choosing not to learn this yet because.
Yeah, I think one of the ways to like think about it is you're the first investor in your business. And so if you were on the other side of it, say deploying capital or joining a startup for equity, or actually going to deploy capital into this venture, like what evidence would you need to see and what action would you need to see these founders and entrepreneurs taking? And are you taking those same actions in building your startup as you're ultimately that first investor? And so maybe that's a way to frame it is, if you were in the other side of the aisle, or if you're the one actually investing, what would that look like, and what evidence would you need to see, and the thought process that those founders would need to go through in actually understanding and looking at their risk. And that's really hopefully what we try to do through Zero to Traction and our other ways of working with founders, is to help them kind of process that risk, which also is tied to the fear of this thing that I want to create and this value that I want to bring into the world might not actually be there. And so there's always some resistance and tension there. But if you could get to that learning faster, whether you're right or wrong, you've saved a boatload of time and resources along that path.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's been a number of cases that we could recall just off the top of our heads, where some founder was working on something for months or years, and then they come to us in some way that they interact. They run an experiment, maybe two, and then realize that they've been chasing nothing for months or years. And I think,
why are you smiling? I'm just kidding.
We've crushed the dreams.
The founder furnace at work.
The founder furnace at work. I just live on the char-grilled dreams of founders.
That sounds like it's like you're like positioning like the Burger King, the char-broiled hot off the press. You want your char-broiled Whopper here?
Yes, exactly. Where every burger is a square. I know that that's Wendy's, but I felt that the pun was worth the stretch.
Yeah, that is.
So no, obviously not. But we do like as much as we joke about it, we do view those as victories, or at least I view those as victories, because like, how long would they have continued to waste the one resource they could never get back, which is time. And so the idea of these like learning cycles is like just like shorting the time it takes to learn something, so that you don't waste your time building something that nobody wants, that you can rededicate your effort to something where you can create extraordinary value. There's nothing wrong with the entrepreneurs, right? It's just that there wasn't an alignment with what the market was looking for. And sometimes that's a subtle pivot. Sometimes that's a dramatic pivot. Sometimes that's abandoning the idea altogether and then moving on to the next thing. And it's an incredible license to be able to say, wow, I don't have to do that anymore. Now let me go work on something that's going to create value for a lot of people. But that possibility being on the table is extraordinarily scary. That's very terrifying. That what you could learn is that the thing that you're most passionate about in your life, at least in your professional life, is bunk. Mm-hmm. And that is always on the table.
For sure. Yeah, and I think before we hop into the game here, I think we do joke around with the kind of these ideas maybe not going anywhere, but getting that evidence earlier on. And I know we kind of share a similar philosophy that entrepreneurship is certainly a very vulnerable act. And for me, and I think we've also talked about it, JDM was like, it's an expression of love to go out there and solve a particular pain point and try to create value for another person. And then there's this vulnerability of like, hey, do you have the problems that I think you have? And trying to understand those needs through empathy, and that we want to get to that learning as quick as possible. And that's why we're in this work, is to empower those people to be as successful as they can, but ultimately, put some of that safeguard to help them in getting to that learning more efficiently and impactfully. And so that could be, it's not just a jokes and games for us. We certainly, bring that love to founders, and want to make sure that that's also known as well.
Awesome. Well, on that note, in the spirit of zero to traction, in the spirit of zero to traction being traction science applied, let's apply it to some real world cases. And maybe, when we actually launch our referral program, maybe one of our prizes should be bringing on one of our adventurous listeners live onto the air to replace one of our AI examples.
Do we have a little fear in launching our rewards, our referral program, do you think?
Either fear or busyness.
So we're a little procrastinity on launching our referral program.
I mean, maybe there's some unprocessed fear there. We should probably work through that.
Well, so maybe that's it. Well, call us out if you're listening here, and if you think we are battling with a little procrastinity related to our referral program, give us a shout on Substack, and we'll see. So
this is our test to see if anybody's actually listening to these episodes. Since we can't make heads or tails of the analytics, like, well, you're just gonna.
Just call us out.
Please let us know
if you're actually listening.
Is anybody here? I feel like we're broadcasting some like old school CB radio.
This is great.
Well, on that note, since we're pressed for time, let's dive right into to our game, which again we are calling Cool Story, but what did you learn? As a reminder of our setup here, Cass is going to give us a startup and then a little narrative of what it is that they just did, whatever activity they just engaged in, something that they're proud of, excited about, maybe something that they're calling a test. And we are going to try to see if we can figure out what they learned, right? What were they trying to learn? How, did it actually test the thing that they were trying to learn? What, if anything, did they actually learn? And if we don't feel that it's super optimal, which would be really off-brand for us, we're always on board with Cass's examples, then we could say, how could we turn this into a real, like kind of usable learning moment? You ready, Cameron?
Let's do it. Let's go.
All right. So our first one here is a SaaS platform that helps freelancers auto-generate contracts, invoices, and payment reminders. Kind of like HoneyBook Lite for solo creatives. All right, cool.
Cool.
All right, here's their story. We built a Notion-based MVP and shared it with a few freelancer Slack communities. Over 400 people viewed it in the first week, and 120 signed up to get access when we launched the real version. You want to start? You want to kick us off? Or you want me to kick us off?
Cool. Well, so I mean, I think there was, they took action. So I like the approach towards, developing the MVP, and I think it's, they didn't go build the full tech. They leveraged existing technology like Notion and other things to kind of get that first working MVP out the door. I think where I'm a little struggling, they said they sent it to kind of these freelancer Slack communities, which could be a good channel to get in front of them. But then they measured some metrics of like 400 people viewed it, which is, is that 400 unique viewers, and like, what did they actually view? Did they click to the landing page? Like, what was the action? And so I would have loved to see a little bit more setup around the experiment itself. And in particularly, are we testing Slack as a go-to-market channel and the way that we're wedging into it? And that then is leading to conversion on our landing page. And then in terms of or are we actually testing the value proposition and it actually resonating with them getting to the landing page and actually signing up? Again, I think the red flag for me is they didn't mention anything about if this was a paid sign up or what was the intention around the offer. So it sounds like they just maybe signed up for a wait list, or they signed up for free use of this product. Which again doesn't have very strong demand signals that there's truly traction behind it. You might be setting yourself up for kind of this process of where a lot of people are hopping on for free, and then when you go turn on the paid element, there's a lot of kinks related to that. So those are the things that stand out for me: is what are we actually testing? Is it the go-to-market channel or the value proposition, and kind of the call to action on wherever they were ultimately converting to? And then lastly was how many people are in these communities. If there's 10,000 people and only 400 people viewed, not as good, right? Like what was the measurement of success related to that? But I think again, it ties to what were you actually testing and what did you need to learn from the experiment itself?
Yeah, I agree that there's a lot of context missing, right? So 400 people, is the numerator, but what's the denominator? That if it's 400 out of 500,
it's just math.
Right. It is math, right? It's absolutely math. So like if the denominator is 500, then that's pretty good. To your point, if the denominator is 10,000, then 400 is not very good, right? And then out of, for 400 people, 120 signed up to get access when we launched the real version. So I have two things that I want to break down here. So one is the 120 versus 400. So that's a little bit better than 1 in 4, but that's not great. So I'm wondering why the drop off there. Where does that drop off happen? The second thing that's really important, I think, to call out is that they said it's a Notion-based MVP, but the metric is people sign up to get access when they launch the real version. So what did the MVP itself test? We're not talking about a landing page test. If you did a landing page test, then you can measure like a wait list. But we did an MVP test and we're measuring a wait list. So those two things are disconnected. Right. And so like, if we're going to do an MVP, what is it that we wanted to test? Were we after value creation? Like, will this actually create value for people? If so, did we charge? Right. And if we didn't charge, then I'm not sure we're really testing that very well. Right. And if we did charge, then why is that not what we're measuring here? And I think we would all know the reason that's not measured here is because that wasn't a good metric. What felt like a good metric was that we got 120 signups for the real version.
Yeah, I mean, I think to that point, like when we think of doing an MVP test, right, that V is really on viable. And it's like, is there actually, a transaction taking place? And so if we're not actually getting any like payment, we're just testing a prototype or the potential offering out there. So I don't think that was truly an MVP test, and they signed up for something, but they didn't talk about any of the was the value delivered and at what price point.
Yeah, exactly. So the experiment of an MVP is not what we measured. So what we measured was essentially a landing page test rather than MVP. And so that's just going to raise a number of questions here. And so what were they actually trying to learn? I'm not sure. It sounds like by putting an MVP in place that they wanted to do a test, and maybe they felt so insecure about doing a test with just a wait list that they felt that they had to do an MVP, and that's fine, right? But then it's like, if were you trying to learn whether people would sign up for the MVP? If so, not what you measured, or at least not what you shared that you measured. And if not, what were you trying to learn? Were you trying to learn, is there problem residence? Were you trying to learn if there was solution residence? Were you trying to learn if you can get waitlist signups? Like, what is it that we were actually trying to learn through that process? I think what you actually learned here is a bit of a gray or black box, because we don't know the denominators, or at least the denominator for the 400 people that viewed it. And we don't know how many people actually signed up for the MVP versus how many people just signed up for a wait list, or if those two are maybe kind of sort of the same thing, or if this was just a completely free thing. So I'm actually, based on the data here, I can't see what you actually learned.
So which label would you put on it?
Oh, I'm going to label them here. I would say, like, I do, like, I know you opened to this, so I want to re-say it again because it's been a while. Like, kudos for like going MVP, doing a test, and putting it out there. I think that's awesome. I think with some tweaks, there's some real learnings that could happen there. So I really like the momentum and the speed. So for me, I'm going to put the label of still don't know anything. This is like, you moved really fast, but you moved fast, like sort of straight into a wall. We didn't really learn anything from it. And so if we can, but that's great because that's showing a lot of momentum. So if we can just redirect you away from that wall, you have a path of rapid forward progress in front of you. And I think that's really encouraging.
Right. We don't want you to keep banging against the wall. We want you to actually move away from that and learn a few things. The market's out there. You just got to go through the door to get out there. So I would probably label it similar. I might also add a tinge of cool story. So it's a fun narrative with, not a ton of signal because we need some additional context. But I think, from a telling the story of some momentum of a bias towards action, I think that's a really solid component, but I don't know that we got any true signal because we didn't really set it up in a real true fashioned MVP test. And so we're saying we did one thing when we didn't actually do that. And so the narrative doesn't fully align, but does have a, strong bias towards action, which we value and appreciate.
Yeah. Neat little anecdote. No traction insight.
Cool.
All right, let's do round 2 of Cool Story, but did you learn anything? So let's hop in. Cass, what do you have for us? Excuse me. All right. A mental wellness app targeting burned out remote coworkers, offering daily mood check-ins, journaling prompts, and short audio meditations. Think Headspace meets your overworked Slack channel. I've seen about 10 of those. All right. Some of them have done well. Most of them haven't. Founder story. All right. We sent a survey to our 3,000 person waiting list asking which features they were most excited about. Over 700 people responded, and journaling prompts came out on top. So that's what we're building next. Okay, Cameron's laughing. That's not good.
Well, it's just like, what a surprise that a mental wellness app, the most prized feature was journaling. That surprises me. Not.
Yeah.
That was part of the laugh there, but I think in general, right, was from a survey, one, we didn't get a ton of response of the wait list. So one, they weren't probably super eager. If not, you didn't get a ton of I guess a high percentage of them ultimately providing feedback. So they're not like chomping at the bit to say, this is the feature that's really solving my particular problem. And so for me, it demonstrates that there's maybe lack of urgency and severity around a particular pain point. Even though we asked them about the features, like they weren't, even responsive enough to say, this is what would solve my particular pain point. And then additionally, just, is this like self-reported that journaling was mentioned, or was this like choose from an option and pick the number one thing? Well, it's like pretty basic that I would think a mental wellness app is going to have journaling. And so if it didn't have journaling as a core component of it, it might be a gap. And so I don't know that you learned anything super new related to the offering out there. So that's kind of where my mind went.
Yeah, I agree. And it says survey, so I'm my default position when someone says survey is to assume a closed-ended set of responses like multiple choice. Um, but it could have been an open-ended question that they're just calling a survey. Um, and we've talked about this before on the show. I think that it's really like a strong best practice that when you have a waitlist, once you collect the email address, the next page, so they've already submitted their email address, you already have them, they're already captioned. The next page is a short survey. And in the case that I'm using it here, it's actually just a series of open-ended questions, 2 or 3. That's it. That you can use to drill into some of their pain points, and that they can use a free-form response that you can then process to learn some more things about. I think that's like to do something like that is totally great. It's a best practice thing. We have this 3,000 person wait list, and I don't know why we asked about features. That's where I'm getting stuck. I'm not sure what we were trying to learn here. Were we trying to learn what to build? In which case, what was the promise of the waitlist? That I'm kind of curious about that. Like, and if we were trying to do something different, like see, what are they excited about? Can we keep them excited or something like that? Then I don't think talking about features is a really good way to do that. I think talking about outcomes is a good way to do that. So I find that a little bit strange as well. I think, to your point, Cameron, 3,000 versus 700 is not a great response rate. But honestly, it's not bad for a frickin' survey. Like, you sent them a survey to fill out. That's not going to be a high engagement way to keep your mailing list like warm. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they were really trying to learn. The best I can gather here is like they want to ask which features they were most excited about. Yeah, maybe it was just trying to use excitement as a proxy for interest, which is just not how it works. And if it was, then you would need way higher than 700 to 3,000. And then a lot of the details around how you measured journaling prompts and what was that in relation to, and how far down the list was number 2, and was this a rank choice thing, or was it they could only pick 1, or were they allowed to pick 2, or like how does this work, right? I think that's going to give a lot of information, because to your point, like a really cheap feature that nobody's really excited about but expects to be in there is going to be like in a ranked choice system. Everybody's going to list that. So it's going to end up falsely getting a really high score, even though it in and of itself isn't going to convert anybody.
Right. Well, I just think like what's outstanding for me is 2,300 people didn't respond. So it's like, what, so one, like, why didn't they respond? Is that like the pain point or the opportunity to help even co-create the solution that they thought they were going to be involved in? They didn't have enough interest to even respond with what their top potential feature might be. And then also baked into that is a large majority of them didn't respond. So you don't actually know fully with the evidence what actually needs to be built. So I think, I don't know that there's a ton of learning related to it. So I think if I was to go into, our labels here, I don't think you still don't know anything, but I don't, comparatively to the last one, this doesn't have as much of a, bias towards action to really like truly test something. I don't think you gathered much insight. So.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm going to go with like, okay, mistaken for iteration, because like you're like, okay, we have this list. Let's get some information from them, even though I don't think it's very useful. And then I'm also going to go with a little startup theater, right? It's like we got this wait list and we're learning like, oh, they're excited about this feature, even though it doesn't really amount to much of anything.
For sure.
All right, should we do one more lightning round?
Let's do one more.
All right, here we go. So, round 3, our final little round of cool story, but what did you learn? Goes to, we ask in real time. It takes a second. All right. A Chrome extension. Oh, don't do me that. A Chrome extension that helps online shoppers auto-apply ethical brand filters, e.g. sustainable, fair trade, cruelty-free. Basically honey, but with a conscience. Okay. All right. We launched our MVP on the Chrome Web Store, tweeted about it, and posted to Reddit and a few Discord servers. We got about 800 installs in the first 2 weeks, and now we're just watching how people use it. Okay, so we're just watching how people use it. That's just we're going to see what happens, right? So that does not count as an experiment.
But they used it how I thought they were going to, because I didn't have any assumption of,
right?
Or I didn't process what my assumption was going to be. So,
or alternatively, they didn't use it how I thought they would, because I didn't think that anything, right?
They just used it, which was
they just used it, and like, how do we know what a good level of usage is, or a bad level of usage is, or what behaviors we're measuring for, or how often it's like? There's nothing here. This is completely useless. So do not ever fall into the bucket of just like, we're just seeing what happens. We're seeing how people use it. All of that stuff is just you intentionally avoiding the potential for being wrong. Embrace being wrong, because that's the only way you actually learn anything, is that if you're wrong. If you can't possibly be wrong, that meant you already knew the answer. If you already knew the answer, you didn't learn anything. So the other thing, we do have some of the same other problems as before. So like, okay, we launched an MVP. So, I mean, okay, fine, cool. I don't know how you make money. I have a big question on that, but there's nothing in here about that. So I'm gonna set it aside.
That was one for me, was they got all these installs, but were they, I guess, free installs, and then they're making their money elsewhere, maybe when people buy products. But yeah, I guess like from a like paid element of it, that's still a gap for me.
Yeah, it's kind of murky, but because we don't have any details on it, I guess I'll just set it aside for now. But okay, you launched MVP, you threw it out there, you got 800 installs in the first 2 weeks. Is that good? I don't know. And like they installed it. Did they use it? Did they make a purchase? Like, a lot of this is going to tie back to your value creation mechanism and how you're making money, how you're capturing value, and how you're creating value. Is it just that we need to see it used, that we need to see a purchase, that we need to see a not purchase, right? Because they were going to buy something and then they learned that, oh, hey, this is not sustainable, or it's not fair trade, or it's not cruelty free, and so therefore we abandoned, right, or whatever. Like, whatever the definition of success is just not there.
I concur. I don't have anything super valuable to add on top of that. So I think the biggest things are, I think we have to have intentionality about how we think they're going to use it, because that ultimately ties to that value creation. So it's like, if we thought this was the value proposition that we put out there with the installation, are they using it to derive that particular value? If not, why not? And now we can go back to the drawing board and maybe better position our Chrome extension for that next set of users.
Yeah, so I'm gonna file this under Startup Theater again, and I think I'm also gonna give it some cool story. So fun narrative, zero signal.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all the time that we have here. We'll do a lightning round also of our frivolous thoughts, because it wouldn't be zero distraction thoughts and frivolous thoughts. So I'll go first. My lightning round is last week, my brother, my older brother, won his second Emmy. So good for him. He's got 2 Emmys. He's got some other awards that he's won as well. Feeling good about that. Well done, Jason. Yeah.
Way to go. Congrats. Yeah. That's huge. Well, shoot, I don't have a major thing. I guess maybe I'll share. I've been, keeping with the, I guess, the TV line of things. Was I started watching the show called Stick. It's another Apple TV. I think Apple TV's got me on some of their recent shows, but it's a funny show about a golfer who kind of washed out with some challenges that he ran into. But it's a good comedy with Owen Wilson, and I can definitely relate to some of the components of being when I played baseball in college and kind of battling the yips, and it kind of connects to some of the mental and physical game, which we also think of maybe connecting it to zero to traction. That traction thinking and traction science does the action, and the way you're thinking about the action kind of go hand in hand. And so it's been a good show, and looking forward to the next episode drop on Wednesday. So
awesome. Well, very cool. That'll bring us to the end of Zero to Traction. Once again, thanks everybody so much for letting us bend your ear for 35 minutes. Time is the one resource you can never get back. Appreciate you spending a little bit of it with us this week. If you got a topic that you want us to discuss or something that's got you curious, definitely hit us up. We're here for you, always looking for new things to talk about or new takes on it. So just hit us up with those things. And if you enjoyed what you heard, tell a friend, rate, review, like, subscribe, all that stuff. But tell a friend, say, hey, I think you should listen to Zero Detraction. I think you'll get a lot out of it, my founder friend, and forward it on their way. We really appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having us in your ear. Always fun chatting with you, JDM, and we'll be in your ear next week. And thank you all for tuning in.